Hello and welcome to Spy versus Spy, Measures and Countermeasures in the Fight Against Malware and Ransomware. Today's webinar is sponsored by Quest and produced by ActualTech Media. My name is Scott Bekker. I'm from ActualTech Media, and I'm excited to be your moderator and a participant for this fun event. So we're going to take a twist on the standard ransomware presentation today. We're hoping you'll enjoy it and find it helpful and informative. But before we get to today's great conversation, I have 4 housekeeping notes for you that will help you get the most out of this session. First off, we want this to be an informative event for you, so we encourage any questions in the questions box in your webinar control panel. Not only will we have team members responding to questions during the live event, we'll also have a dedicated Q&A session at the end of the presentation where we'll discuss in greater detail some of the top questions that you ask. That Q&A panel is also the place to let us know about any technical issues that you might be experiencing. A browser refresh will fix most audio, video, and slide advancement issues, but if that doesn't work, just let us know there in the Q&A and we'll provide further technical assistance. Second, in the handout section of your webinar control panel, you'll find that we're offering several resources. I'd especially like to call your attention to a PDF about ransomware protection and recovery with NetVault Plus. So I encourage you to access that PDF and the other resources in the console from ActualTech Media, and feel free to share them with your friends and colleagues. Now, third, at the end of this webinar event, we'll be awarding a $250 Amazon gift card to one lucky registrant. Of course, you must be in attendance during the live event to qualify for that prize. Official terms and conditions of today's prize drawing can be found in the handout section. Just scroll to the bottom and you'll find the prize terms and conditions link there. Now, fourth and finally, one of the best benefits of this event is the opportunity to ask a question of our expert presenters. So to help encourage your questions, we have a special additional prize for you. That's another Amazon gift card, this one for $50 for the best question. After the event is over, we'll look at all the questions that came in, pick out the very best one, and contact that prize winner. All right. So we're talking today about how ransomware attackers get in and how you keep them out. So in order to come at this from a different angle that's hopefully helpful, I'm going to pose today as the attacker, and Aaron Newsome from Quest will play the role of the defender. We'll each explain what we're doing and why. Now, the focus of the defense will be on the backup and recovery side primarily. So I'll run through quickly what some of the things I'm doing in the early stage of an attack are, and Aaron will talk broadly about countermeasures there, but our focus is really going to be on the implications of different steps in setting up backups, protecting backups, and restoring backups to keep operations running after an attack. So as I said, I'm going to be posing as an attacker. So I'm going to be posing as one of these guys today. I didn't want to do the standard thing of, dressing up in a hoodie and sunglasses while sitting at my desk. I mean, how are those stock art hackers even supposed to see the keyboard in the screen, right? So I'm looking more to be one of these kind of guys today. The guys who, they text photos of themselves to girls with stacks of cash, which we all see when they're indicted later. And that's why I'm trying not to be exactly like these guys, because all these guys got caught. So the guy on the right, for example, is Mark Sokolovsky. He was doing well. He had stacks of cash, as you can see, and the Porsche that you see in the center. But the war in Ukraine happened, and the photo here is from a security camera as he's leaving Ukraine to avoid conscription. That put him on the FBI's radar, and he was arrested in the Netherlands on Department of Justice charges that he's one of the key administrators behind the Raccoon info stealer. But so my role today is to be one of these guys trying to break into your network and hold your data for ransom. And opposing me today, I'm happy to introduce the blue team side of our event here. We have Aaron Newsome, product manager for Quest Software. Aaron, welcome.
Thank you, Scott. Glad to be here. First, want to say thanks to you and ActualTech Media for having us along today. And a special thanks to everyone who took time out of their day to join. We'll promise to try and provide something useful. I know everyone's time is valuable and we're all busy. So hopefully you get something out of this. Hopefully you get a lot out of this. But thank you for having me, Scott.
Absolutely. So I've got your slide up here. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. So I am in my 19th year with Quest. I've been in IT for almost twice that time. I've been mostly working in the data center and doing a lot of different things, but with Quest specifically, over my career here, I've focused on performance and infrastructure monitoring in the data center, and obviously backups, disaster recovery, and all things related to those.
Awesome. All right, and I like the in your image here, you've got the blue shirt on, since you're blue team.
Well, I actually thought it would be kind of cool to try and replicate what was in the image, but I just couldn't find that blue shirt. So it's a great Quest polo for today.
All right, fair enough. Okay. Well, looking forward to comparing notes with you, Aaron, on the two sides of this ransomware incident. So we're going to start with a quick overview of what we as an attacker community have been up to. So, we're sort of back in the money in 2023. You can see here on this chart that ransomware payouts are trending back up. The source for this data is Chainalysis, and they're a cryptocurrency tracing firm. So 2021 was a record year for ransomware payments. You can see it hit almost $1 billion that year. Now, 2022 saw a huge drop. So you remember our friend Mark and his Porsche at the border. We'll talk about him in a second, in regards to that drop. But this year, ransomware payouts are returning to nearly that torrid pace from 2023 or from 2021. So based on the $450 million in payouts in the first half of this year, Chainalysis is projecting about $900 million in payments for 2023. So this correlates to a general surge in overall ransomware activity in 2023, bring it back up from that drop in 2022. So what happened in 2022? People are attributing that slump to a number of factors. One is expanded security protections and preparedness playing a role. Decryption tools became available from private companies and the FBI to help victims unlock their data without paying attackers. And then getting back to Mark and his Porsche at the border, a lot of people think that Russia's invasion of Ukraine hit that day-to-day operations of a number of prominent ransomware groups, which are primarily based in Russia, or a lot of them are based there. So we're still seeing those defensive measures in place, and that's still effective. But ransomware payouts and spending are going back up. So, why is that 2023? Again, sort of two potential culprits. As the war in Ukraine sort of evolves into a more stable pattern, maybe that's allowing ransomware actors in the region to adjust and get back to business. Then you've got a surge in extortion efforts that are closely related to ransomware, and we'll talk about that quite a bit later. So that's sort of the big picture. But let me talk about what I'm doing as an attacker to get your data. And I've got two main strategies. So here's the first one. You can follow along on the right side there. I'm buying my malware on the dark web from ransomware as a service operations or brokers of individual components. These tools require very little skill, and I'm essentially following wizards to launch attacks. Not necessarily targeting any company in particular. It's more of a sort of spray and pray approach. Organizations with fewer security controls are most at risk. Think of it like a burglar trying every door in an apartment. If one of them isn't locked, in I go. So my hope is that one of many victims pays. So what are some characteristics of this kind of attack? It doesn't require much skill. It doesn't require much capital. I don't have to pay skilled hackers or invest in learning the skills myself. Plus, prices for things on the dark web can be shockingly low, in terms of tools and compromised credentials and things like that. So there's one major requirement, and that would be that I have a complete lack of ethics and miss a moral compass. But organizations with unpatched vulnerabilities, limited monitoring, inconsistent backups, other security hygiene problems are probably the most susceptible for this kind of attack. Being small really doesn't protect you. You're not hunted because you're an attractive target. You sort of get caught up in a wide net. The dwell time can be pretty short. Sort of as soon as I'm in as an attacker, that encryption may begin automatically and the ransom note appears. And because there's little research on you as an organization, on my part as the attacker, the ransom is probably lower so that you can pay it off and get it over with. So, with all that said, Aaron, how are you stopping me here?
Well, I think the most important thing to realize about what's happening in that strategy one, you're really casting a wide net. You're not really targeting a specific business. These tools that hackers like yourself can get off the dark web just kind of really go for everything, and they kind of look for that back door. So my most important thing to recognize here is that you have to think about the protection against this kind of attack in layers. Kind of here on the right hand side, I put in a slide, layer one, layer two, layer three, and really the point that I'm trying to make here is that your backups are the last line of defense. Ideally, you want to kind of stop those, spray and pray attacks with layers 1, 2, and 3, or however many layers there are in your protection strategy. And then, understand that your backups are the last line of defense. And we're going to talk about some of the strategies for how to make sure that if you have to use that last line of defense, that it's actually going to be able to get you out of the hot water. And we'll get into that a little bit later. But everything that you said in that first part of the attack, this is really typical. They're not sophisticated, doesn't require a lot of skill. They're extremely common. These things are happening right now, all day and every day. These attacks are going on. I like to call them the low-hanging fruit. And incidentally, these are the kinds of attacks that are easiest to protect against once you have a strategy in place. I'm going to talk a little bit about some of that strategy a little bit later here in the presentation.
Okay, sounds good. Well, let's move on to my strategy number 2. So this one is highly targeted. So to use my last analogy, I'm a hunter now. I'm not fishing. I'm going to conduct some recon in your organization. I'm going to spend some time getting to know you with all the typical techniques, of any attacker, ransomware or not. Looking at job listings for the technical skill requirements to tell me what software and cloud infrastructure you're using. I'm picking through, social media posts of employees. I'm scanning the network. Maybe I'm buying some dark web databases of exposed username and password combinations, researching the CEO for a whaling attack. I'm using ChatGPT variants, to refine the English for my phishing efforts. And once I've gotten in, I'm going to move laterally, and I might be around the network for longer than the average dwell time. During all this time, I'm doing more research, now inside. So I'm looking for your backups. I'm looking for an insurance policy to figure out what the terms are. I'm looking at cash on hand and financial information if I can get it. My goal here is to develop a sophisticated and very high ransom demand that takes those factors into account. And so recapping there, high skill is required. This is sort of the hacker that people typically think of, for technical social engineering research. I need some financial resources, be it, investment in my own skills or, hiring people who can do this, and, spending more time. And I'll probably have the victim in mind ahead of time, or, I have a small group of victims. So, you think about businesses being vertically focused. I'm maybe going to be vertically focused on hospitals or law firms, learn how they work and, serially hit them. Any organization can be targeted from this kind of a thing. It is more likely that, larger organizations are more at risk, or higher profile organizations, for this kind of attack where somebody's going to invest because they know there's money there to get. Extortion is also likely in addition to, or even instead of, that ransom. Going to have a longer dwell time, and then, the ransom may be very high. I'm going to take all those factors that I was researching while I was in the network into account in calculating what I'm going to demand. So, Aaron, how are you undermining my efforts here?
Well, really just kind of being more focused. So your strategy number 2, where it's more of a focused attack on particular organizations or particular verticals, Understanding that a lot of the times your strategy number one is what feeds you into that strategy number two. Just last week, I learned of a high-profile WordPress, unpatched WordPress server that would divulge the list of users on the server, maybe not their credentials, but just an attacker knowing that his tools are going to try and exploit WordPress in that way and get a list of users. Your attack strategy is already furthered just by having a list of users that you can try and brute force your way into a system using that list of users. So really, every attack, successful attack, goes back to some entry point. And that's why I put that first here on the slide. Understanding those entry points, understanding how those attackers get in. One of the things that has been very helpful for me is to subscribe to, there's numerous lists out there of, security breaches, and you can learn detailed information about how these breaches happened. A lot of these security breaches lead to what we're talking about here, which are the ransomware attacks. Understanding those entry points and being able to prioritize what your approach is to defending against those particular kinds of things. And this evolves. So what you learn today isn't necessarily what's valid for tomorrow. If you think back just not even that long ago, you would never think that a swipe card to get you into a building could be used to infiltrate a network. You would never think that a manufacturer of a motherboard or an Ethernet card could put firmware into that card that is undetectable by the OS, but yet is leaking information in some way. And there's a long list of these kinds of things that just kind of a few years ago you wouldn't think were possible, but now they are possible. So understanding those entry points and how to defend against them. The next, kind of boils into prioritizing those threats. In my strategy number one, I talked about documenting your plan, and really what you're trying to achieve when you're documenting that plan is just being able to demonstrate that you understand what the threats are and what their priority are and how you're going to defend yourself against them. And using that information in that documented plan, you can kind of prioritize how you want to go about it. But important to realize that at this level, you really do have to have a measured response. You have to be prepared. You have to be able to demonstrate that you have some approach. And I've worked in IT for many years before I was part of Quest, so I know that when your boss comes in and asks you, okay, what's your plan for defending ransomware? Just telling them that we're on it and that we've covered all the bases is probably not going to fly. You have to show that you've actually thought through what some of those things are. And again, the point of all of this is you never want it to get to the point where you need to use your backups. But it is that last line of defense. So having a 3-2-1 rule is a good start. It's not the entire plan, but a 3-2-1 rule methodology for backups is a good start. And some of the more recent advanced technologies like continuous data protection to lower those RTOs and RPOs for fast recovery. You hear a lot about immutability, and surprise, you're going to hear a lot about it today because it is also one of the tools that make sure if that ransomware attack gets to that last defense, which is your backups, that you have recoverability. But I did want to talk a little bit about that document your plan. Hopefully this is something you can take away from the presentation. Scott, if you want to hit the next slide, this is one of the things that I like to do when I think about kind of all the threats out there. And I didn't pull up all the threats out there. There could be dozens or even hundreds of different kinds of threat. I picked a few of the threats that I thought were something nice to talk about. And the reason I laid them out this way, with a kind of it's a scatter plot, but it's an XY with a bubble for a third and a fourth, which is the total score, which you see in brackets there. So let me tell you a little bit about what you're looking at here. Along the bottom, the difficulty to protect against, and these are my own scores that I've assigned here. So we assign each one of these kinds of threats kind of a difficulty of how hard it is to protect against this kind of thing. And then along the left-hand side on the vertical, I put the likelihood to occur. And this is based on, the security breaches that we know to have occurred, things like that. And I chose those two, likelihood to occur and difficulty to protect against. But maybe in your business, you pick two different ones. You might pick how likely it is to get me fired, or how likely it is that you can upset the board if you don't defend against this thing, or how likely it is to put you out of business. You can use kind of whatever parameters you like. But then I also added a third in addition to the XY, which is the cost. So things that are less costly, I made a small circle, and things that are more costly to protect against, I made a larger circle. So I used those three parameters: likelihood to occur, difficulty to protect against, and then the cost, the size of the circle, and I put those into a total score. And that's what you see in the brackets. That's your heat map along the left-hand side. Now, you might be saying, how do I use something like this to advance my ransomware protection strategy? How do I actually put this into practice? Well, really, that depends on kind of what your priority is. So if you're a cost-conscious company, you might start in the upper left-hand quadrant and take the things that are most likely to occur, that cost the least, and the difficulty to protect against is low. Because you don't have a lot of money, you're cost-conscious, that's maybe where you would start. If you have other priorities, you might take, things in the upper right-hand quadrant, unpatched OSs and malicious links, and figure out how to protect against these. But the point is, this isn't a plan, but it's a good place to start to create your plan. Each one of these dots that you see on here, and your chart might have twice as many or three times as many dots, but each one of these dots should have a documented plan on what you're doing, how it might affect your business, and how you are going to protect against that. So then when your boss comes into your office and says, what's your plan against ransomware, you're prepared. A lot of these things, especially the bigger circles that are more expensive to defend against, you're going to have to justify that. You may not get the money unless your justification looks sound. So being able to start to begin to document your plan will help you in getting those protections that you need to protect against the different things that are out there. So hopefully I made that clear, Scott. I didn't mean to kind of USA Today-ify the presentation, but I think this is a good place to start. And I like looking at things visually, so hopefully folks get a lot out of this.
No, that's a really nice place to start, and I'll leave that up here for a second in case we don't have that available as a downloadable resource. But if you want to print screen and grab that screen grab that one, we'll just leave it there for a second. So the next thing that we're going to talk about is dwell time. So let's talk about what I'm doing in the dwell time. So assuming that, we haven't been able to defend against, all of these things here on this graphic here, the typical ransomware exposure, and I've, found one of these ways to get in, then what am I doing once I'm in there? So, and so, of course, this is that period of time when I've breached your network, but I haven't initiated my attack. I haven't announced my presence, encrypted your data, or demanded a ransom. So first, let's talk about how long, I'm in there. How long are attackers in there? So there are a couple of estimates here from different companies, and they're using different methods and different data to calculate, but these numbers are sort of surprisingly short. Over the years, there's been research about attackers lingering in the network for months. and these are averages, so it could be much longer, but Sophos and Mandiant here are measuring dwell time generally in days. So, attackers are rooting around for a bit, but you don't necessarily have that long to detect them and kick them out before they're launching an attack. You'll notice too that Mandiant was at 11 days in 2021. Sophos was at 5 days, but they both converged on 9 days in 2022. So it's kind of a dwell time number to keep in mind. So what am I doing in your systems when I'm dwelling? So I've got two tracks here. One's technical and one is sort of the business of ransom or extortion orientation related. So on the technical side, after the initial attack, from the phishing or social engineering or an unpatched vulnerability, I'm in there, trying to elevate the privileges that I've gained, and I'm trying to move laterally through the network, and I'm doing some recon for partner connections, maybe, usernames and passwords if I can find them, anything of value. On the right side of the slide here, just from, generally what I'm up to, what I'm trying to accomplish is I'm spending time in there evaluating the value of the data. I might be looking for those insurance terms for companies that have insurance policy. I'm going to try to find a way to corrupt backups or to access backups. And I'm also maybe starting to steal any valuable data that I find. So that's generally what I'm up to in the dwell time phase. And Aaron, maybe, this next piece is for you. If you want to say anything about dwell time, great. But, one of the things that you're going to help protect against a dwelling attacker is to encrypt the backups. So I wonder if you can spell that out a bit and how it fits in with the
yeah, absolutely, Scott. So the dwell time is it's probably one of the more frightening aspects of what the hackers have been doing, what the trends have been showing. I know you showed that from Sophos and Mandiant that the dwell time was measured in days, but we've seen some of these successful hacks that the ransomware itself was kind of planted in the network, months or many months before it actually began to cause issues, and that's frightening enough on its own, but that has infected your systems. It's not acting, it's kind of more of a dormant ransomware. And then you're backing up those systems every day. You're putting that infected data into your backup, your cache of data. And with that backup data being your last line of defense, this can be a really, really important thing to look out for, is that when you do have that ransomware go active, that you are going to begin, resuming operations by using your backup data to restore systems. It's really important to make sure that you understand that the data you're restoring is not also infected. You don't want to reinfect yourself by restoring backups that have been compromised. So there's some strategies that you can use to protect against that when you're doing restores. One of the things that I always urge folks to do is to plan your disaster recoveries, and to also test them frequently. Document that plan and make sure that it is that you're accountable for performing those tests. The worst time to find out that your plan falls short is when you need it the most. So if there is a disaster, a ransomware breach, these things should be just a plan that you've already done. It's already been documented. You know what needs to be done, and you can restore with confidence. And restore being confident that the data that you're restoring is not reinfecting yourself with data that was previously corrupted. So that's kind of my word on dwell time. But I did want to take a minute to kind of go over some of the things that I think is important to understand about encryption. Obviously encryption is a big part of backup. But even just a few years ago, it was kind of best practice to only encrypt your backups that were going off site. If your backups were being sent to a device locally that's in your own data center, the old way of thinking is, do I really need to encrypt those backups? Because the data is really not going outside of my network. Well, as we talk about your next topic, Scott, exfiltrating the data, it's going to be important to understand that wherever your backups live, they need to be encrypted. And this is kind of a dual-pronged approach in that you always need to encrypt backups in flight and at rest. No matter what tool you're using, whether it's tools from Quest for doing all of these things or tools from another vendor, it's important that to understand that encrypting and in flight and at rest is not just technical buzzwords and jargons meant to sell you something. It's actually an important part. And when you get to when we talk about exfiltrating data, you're going to see why that's important. And also, let me add this last point here. I'm really excited about that. On the left-hand side, I mentioned on-premise, off-site, and in the cloud. Any copy of that data needs to be encrypted. And the reason I'm so excited about it is because we just released a new feature that gives you some confidence in that all of your copies are encrypted and protected against ransomware. So that's really the point I wanted to make about encrypting backups, Scott. Hopefully, that got everybody thinking. Are my backups encrypted? Are all the copies of my backups encrypted? Are my on-premise, on-site, off-site, and cloud versions, are they all encrypted? And is that data being transferred, encrypted across the wire as well? So that was my point there.
Okay, super. Yeah, and you got a kudos there from Justin, who said great points, Aaron. So
yep,
well done. Thanks, Justin. So as Aaron promised, the next thing we're going to get into is exfiltrating data. So exfiltration is another top way to bring in money these days for attackers. So we talked earlier about how the exfiltration routes for extortion may help explain why cryptocurrency payouts are rising again this year after dropping last year. So let's talk about my money making playbook here. So the first thing I'm doing is I'm encrypting data or exfiltrating it. Well, actually, I'm encrypting it and then exfiltrating it, both. So, but then I can do two things with that. I can demand a decryption ransom, and then I can demand an extortion payment, saying that I've got this data and maybe I'll delete it if you pay me. And then, of course, I can attack again. I can sell your name. Or I could sell your data privately, even if I don't publish it online. So there are just, attackers just have a lot of ways to monetize your data, and they've gotten more creative in the last year about ways to do that. So that encryption with a cryptocurrency demand for decryption is sort of the classic ransomware, but now that's only one of the routes where you can sort of be victimized. Extortion is becoming more common, especially if you've got PII in your data. And then there's no guarantee that one attack is the end. There's no honor among thieves. We'll use the data again. We'll say that we're deleting it, but we're not. Just pop up as another group or sell it to someone else. So that's the sort of the business opportunity on the exfiltration and extortion side. Aaron, what are your thoughts on exfiltration?
Well, yeah. This goes right back to my point that I was making on encryption. When you're storing your backups and you're storing them unencrypted, exfiltration becomes a real big concern, because anyone who happens to get that data out of your network now has full access to whatever's in that data, whether it be a database, whether it be documents, whether it be really any kind of data. There really is no limit to it. and being able to protect that data with encryption, so that if they do happen to steal your data, it's completely useless. And another point I wanted to make, Scott, was just how advanced, some of the things you were talking about in your last slide there, how advanced these ransomware companies have become. We all have the as you said at the beginning of the slide, the guy in the hoodie and the glasses working out of his basement. But these companies have become really companies. They're advanced. I mean, they recruit talent off of main job search sites. They have LinkedIn profiles. They have HR departments. They operate more like companies than some random guy doing it for kicks.
And customer service departments. The ones that actually do decrypt your data, that they've had call centers. There've been reports of companies with call centers where they try to help you get your data back with their decryption.
Yeah, absolutely. And my second bullet here, the other point I wanted to make here is, you can use that data once you've stolen that data. It can be used for future attacks. So even if you do pay and you do get your decryption key and you do get back up and running in business, some of the data that's in there could be used for future attacks. There's an endless number of different ways that data can be used to reattack you. I don't think really we stop and think about all the different things that are in like metadata, like documents that might have server names or share paths, or an ODBC connection to a database that's named payroll. Things like this are going to be in the metadata, maybe not the data itself, but the data the metadata that exists in there can be used to further attack, and we all have to kind of be aware of that and be ready to protect against it. And you've already had it on your slide, Scott, a couple different times. The PII, the personally identifiable information. This is kind of the golden trophy for hackers and ransomware actors, is once they get that PII, they really kind of have you over a barrel. A lot of these industries have, mandatory reporting for breaches. And once you handle PII, even in countries without GDPR, once you handle that PII, you're really need to step your game up when it comes to protecting against ransomware, because as we've seen in many cases in the past, losing that level of information can really put you out of business. So I made it a point to put PII on my slide as well, because it is so important that we protect other people's data. And as someone who uses a lot of internet services, my name and credit card number and home address and social are out there in dozens of different databases. And I realize that these companies that have my information, they need to be especially careful when it comes to PII, because that can be the difference between showing up for work tomorrow and being out of business.
Absolutely. All right. So D-Day or E-Day for encrypting day, this is when it happens. So, okay, I'm pressing my big red button. I'm encrypting your data, posting the ransom note. My job is basically done at this point. All that's left for me to do is have my team or myself sitting by a keyboard to negotiate on the ransom if it comes to that, or troubleshoot your decryption key if you pay and can't access your data. If I'm the honorable type. We did have a comment from Shelby, who said, "I love the no honor among thieves, but I think they honor like the money." You're absolutely right, yeah. Shelby. It's some of them. The business model is let's do good customer support, so we get a reputation that if you pay our ransom, you get a decryption key that works. But not all of them are like that, and they're still stealing your data. So, but Aaron, what are you doing with Quest NetVault Plus to defend backups against me and ensure that the data can be restored?
Well, Scott, in this slide, we've the presentation, we've made it to the D-Day. Ransomware is in your network. It is encrypting systems. It is spreading laterally throughout your network. This is really where you don't want to be. In my previous slide, when I talked about strategies and how to protect against things, in front of backups, there was, some number of layers. And at this point, they've already failed. So, we're at that point where your backups are that last line of defense. And if we fail at this point, it's usually going to mean that we're going to pay a ransom. So if you take anything from this presentation, take away the fact that backups are your last line of defense. So the product that I wanted to bring into the conversation here is really the NetVault Plus from Quest. This is the product that we position to be that last line of defense. And within that product solution, we have added a lot of different features and capabilities that we think are going to be important when your backups are the last line of defense. So NetVault Plus is a big product. Unfortunately, I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about all the different areas. I threw a couple of the things that are most notable here up on the slide. With the broad platform supporting all the major platforms, hypervisors, down to applications, databases, all of those things that you're likely going to want to protect. And then we have a number of features that are going to be really pertinent to this conversation. So Scott, if you want to move to the next slide, specifically, I wanted to talk about some of the things that we've done to kind of make it more secure. And a lot of these are terms that you've kind of heard me mention through the presentation up until this point. We give you the option of deploying NetVault Plus completely on a Linux platform, which has some protections against ransomware, some things some tools that can be used on the Linux platform that allow you to better protect yourself against ransomware. Multi-factor authentication. When I created this slide, I didn't realize that just yesterday, because I did not create this slide yesterday, I created it last week, but just yesterday, we had one of the most trusted and most respected identity providers who suffered a very, very serious breach. Their stock price dropped 11% in one day, which was yesterday, and it was all due to a credential leak. And a credential leak by itself should not be something that is an event, because if we're all using multi-factor authentication, then credential leaks are likely not going to get anywhere. But in this case, the credential leak was used for something that did not have multi-factor authentication, and it caused a breach. And as a identity provider, this vendor is going to catch a lot of heat, because all of their customers who use their identity provider services are probably going to be at risk. So I can't stress enough how important technologies like multi-factor shouldn't be just a nice to have anymore. Really, this day and age with ransomware and all the things that we've talked about up until this point, it should be pretty clear that multi-factor is not an optional thing. It really needs to be there. We talked about being able to recover from disasters like ransomware quickly. Things like CDP, continuous data protection, I should say, and incrementals forever. These allow you to run your backup cycles much more frequently. In the old days, we used to do, an incremental at night and maybe do a full on the weekend. These kinds of strategies are really no longer relevant in a modern data center with ransomware threats. So part of protecting yourself against these threats is to have recovery points that are very close together, and CDP and incrementals forever allow you to do that. Like I mentioned before, the 3-2-1, having 3 copies of your data, as a start is just really the beginning. 2 of those copies need to be at least one of those copies needs to be off premise. But really, we're seeing the norm now is to take that even further. In fact, I did a complete blog post on that. I'm not sure if it's in your handout or not, but I talked about the importance of 3-2-1 is really kind of a minimum approach to backups. Also, another point I brought up is immutability. And I'm sure you're aware that all the backup vendors are talking about immutability as a panacea. By itself, it's not, but it is an important part of your backup strategy. Being able to make sure that when you write that data, that it can't be changed, not by an administrator, not by you, not by a hacker, or some vendor who holds the master key to your immutability padlock. Being able to know that when you write your data, it's going to be immutable, it can't be changed. And I mentioned before the importance of making sure that all of the copies of your data are immutable. When you have a 3-2-1 strategy and you're making backups on premise, you're replicating those backups, and then you're then tiering that data off to the cloud. Along the way, each one of those needs to be immutable so that you can't have breaches creeping in through the lack of immutability at any one of those stages. So that's an important thing that we think is an important feature. I'll also mention kind of more of a technical nuts and bolts. A lot of times we hear about these ransomware breaches, and they're happening via exploitation of industry protocols like CIFS and NFS. CIFS really had a heyday for ransomware propagation because they were using kind of vulnerabilities in the CIFS protocol for propagating their data throughout the network. With Quest and NetVault Plus, we have a storage protocol that is proprietary to the product. And it not only allows us to perform extremely well with client-side deduplication and automatic encryption, some of the things we've been talking about, but there is no known ransomware attack against the protocol that we've created. It exists in all of the components of our product, and that's how NetVault Plus transfers that data around the network, and you can be reasonably sure that it is secure. We designed it to be that way, so it's an important part, really more of a technical in the weeds thing, but I thought it was important to bring up here. And then part of whatever your overall strategy is, having some kind of air-gapped protection. And when I say air-gapped, I do mean air-gapped. A lot of vendors will try and tell you that something that's connected to the network is somehow air-gapped, but air-gapped really means that, truly air-gapped, where an attacker can't access it in any way because it's physically not connected to the network. So being able to navigate that type of a backup strategy with air-gap is something that's important, and we help our customers design systems that do exactly that. And then, Scott, maybe kind of a last point here. I've kind of mentioned, CDP and how it relates to RPOs and things like that. Really an important part of that is what we call instant restore. It's a feature that's within the product. And for your virtualized environments, for your VMware environments, it allows you to get your systems back online within seconds. And the way that we do that is when you choose to power up that system and bring it back from your previous backup, you can have it up in seconds, because what's actually happening is it's sitting in our deduped storage pool, but it's running live from there while it migrates itself over to the production storage pool. So that's important for a few reasons, but one of the main reasons being that since you don't need a temporary storage space in order to begin that spin-up process, you can run it entirely in our deduped storage pool. You can also do things like guarantee to yourself that the data you're bringing back is not infected. Being able to spin it up while it's in the deduped storage state allows you to run your tools against it to make sure that it is ransomware free. So it's an important point. I wanted to include it on here, but it's fast. We call it instant because it is just seconds. So those are some of the things that I thought were important to bring to the conversation. Hopefully I've said something that gets you thinking about what your backup strategy is and how you measure against some of the things that we mentioned were important. And if you're lacking in any of those areas, I'm going to really recommend that you reach out and talk to the folks at Quest. In fact, we've made it really easy to do that. Scott, if you want to hit the next slide. One of the things we wanted to bring to this presentation with ActualTech Media is to highlight the fact that we're doing a ransomware protection assessment. And this is something that is completely free. If you hit that link that's at the bottom of the slide, you will be, it's a really short form. We don't ask a lot of stuff up front, just basically your name, your company, and how do I get in touch with you? And we'll reach out and we can schedule one of those ransomware assessments. So in that ransomware assessment, we're going to help you kind of go over some of the points that Scott and I did today. How protected are you against ransomware? Where do you have holes? Where do you have areas you can improve on? And really, that's what the ransomware assessment is all about. It's not necessarily about selling you a new product, although we'd be happy to if we can help you. But just being able to get an assessment of how you are and what grade you have against protecting against ransomware can be very helpful. So I encourage everyone to do that.
Okay. All right. Well, and we do have some questions coming in here from the audience. A comment from Ala, who said, when I said in a previous life that Linux is more secure, nobody believed me, with a smiley face. So I think he appreciated your comment there about being Linux based for security purposes.
Well, and Scott, we've heard this one for ages. We've heard the same thing about Mac OS versus Windows. Being a different OS doesn't necessarily make it secure by design. What sometimes can make it more secure is that it is a smaller platform. And by smaller, I mean
market share wise,
all of the ransomware tools that are out there. And you look at how many of those ransomware tools are made specifically for targeting Windows vulnerabilities. There are a lot more of those than there are for tools that are made for exploiting Linux or Mac OS. So I don't want to give the wrong impression in that Linux is more secure, but everything that kind of surrounds why security conscious folks choose Linux, those are all valid things. But I agree. It's not necessarily more secure by design.
And Michael says that learned today that the backup is the last line of defense. So that's great. Alexander's wondering, what size of company would air gap controls be viable for?
So, when I talk about company size, this really can be kind of misleading because, Quest, obviously we work with some very, very large companies. Having hundreds of petabytes of data, which is a lot of data. But we also have very, very small companies, that have a small number of employees. One of our biggest customers has only a handful of employees, but they have a ton of data because they make movies. They're a movie studio, and movies are very large, especially when you take into consideration all of the source footage and related assets that go along with a movie. But it really could apply to any size company. I think that what's most important is that your backup strategy kind of mesh with what you're willing to pay. How much you're willing to invest in it. And that really boils down to what's the data worth. It's like insurance on your car. If I pay $5,000 for a car, there's no chance that I'm going to pay $10,000 to insure that car because the car is just not worth more than the $5,000 I paid for it. So what my strategy for protecting that $5,000 car is I'm going to spend an appropriate amount of money to protect it. So maybe I don't get all the fancy bells and whistles like air gap and cloud, because cloud can become expensive depending upon how much data you're storing in there. But you really want to match your strategy to what the data is worth for you. When I threw up that graphic earlier, Scott, and I looked at all of those different things, one of the things that a lot of companies consider is how much does it costs for my business to be down. And as that cost of business being down creeps up, you need to be ready to spend more to protect that business. So it's not really a size. It's more of a, having the right strategy for the right business.
Okay. All right. So, yeah, it makes sense. One question I wanted to ask you about is I love hearing people's perspective on what 3-2-1 means now with the cloud, because obviously it's a formula that came into being before the cloud was even close to existing. But since you've blogged on it recently, I'd love to hear your perspective on what it means, and maybe since you were talking about it being a bare minimum, what is sort of that next step in your view?
Well, 3-2-1, 3 copies of your data, 2 of those copies on different devices, so that you're not storing your data in in the same infrastructure, and then 1 of those copies needs to be off premise. So that is kind of the bare minimum. My blog posting goes into a 4-3-2-1, and what's that for? What does that actually mean? So the 4 is taking some extra steps like immutability, CDP, short RPOs, some of the things to kind of consider as an adjunct to the old 3-2-1 as really the new bare minimum. So 3-2-1 is no longer the bare minimum. But I'd suggest that folks reach out and we can get you onto that blog post, and you can read all about what I wrote there.
All right, very cool. Hey, one other thing, you mentioned the air gap in the tape, and I'm wondering if Quest has seen an increase in number of customers who are interested, again, in tape, who maybe hadn't used tape for a while, but because of ransomware have been more interested in it.
Yeah, absolutely. And Scott, like I said, I've been with Quest for almost 20 years now. And if I could tell you the number of times that I've heard, this is the year that tape is going away.
Right.
And by the way, it's never come true. It's never even come close to coming true. We work with a lot of companies that have very, very secure data needs, and for them, tape is not going away. I am seeing a new interest in tape, being able to put data on a device and be sure it's offline, but be sure it's recoverable when we need it. In fact, one of the major tape vendors, 2 of them, IBM, HP, these are companies that are both coming out with newer, denser tape technologies, and they expect the demand to be really big because your data source size is not shrinking, and through all the iterations of LTO, you add a number to the end of the LTO, and that means it's going to be a bigger device, and these newer devices are going to be on a much bigger scale, able to store more data, and we are seeing a lot of interest for products that don't have the ability to create truly air-gapped backups. They're going to be at risk. So we don't plan to remove these capabilities from our product anytime soon because the market's demonstrated that we do need them.
Okay. All right. Well, it looks like we're running out of time, Aaron. We've somehow managed to fill up an hour with this conversation that's been it's been fun, but it's also been really enlightening. But I did want to just say, if somebody wants to get started, with Quest NetVault Plus or find out more, what do you recommend?
So absolutely, first thing on the list, I recommend the ransomware assessment program, and that's the link that you're showing on the slide here. We also have a landing page. Maybe Bennett or someone else from Quest can pop that into the chat, and that's the NetVault Plus landing page on the main Quest website. So if you're curious about any of the capabilities or what kinds of data we protect or some of the important things to be aware of, the landing page is a good place to start. And if you want to see more about kind of customers' own experience with NetVault Plus, we do have a community forums, and those are linked from the main landing page. So ransomware assessment and the Quest NetVault Plus landing page, that is my recommendation.
Okay. All right. Super. Well, Aaron, thanks for spending this time with me. I really appreciate all your insights, and this has been fun.
Thanks for having me.
All right. Well, have a great day, and I'll let you go onto your busy day, and we're going to go to the prize drawing from here. So take care, Aaron.
Excellent. Yeah, I'm guessing I'm not eligible to win the prize, so
you are not.
I'll say thanks to everyone, and great questions, and I appreciate you guys having me on. Thanks, Scott. We'll talk to you soon.
Thanks, Aaron. Bye. All right. And before we wrap up, we do have that one more piece of business, the Amazon gift card prize drawing. And the winner of the $250 Amazon gift card today is James Hostetter from Georgia. So congratulations to James Hostetter. We'll be in touch to get you your card. And with that, on behalf of the ActualTech Media team, I want to thank Quest for making this event possible. And thanks as always for attending and for all your great questions in the console. That concludes this event. Have a fantastic day, and we will see you next time.